Hello world, welcome to the Land Down Under Hangout, and tonight we are discussing Remnant Population by Elizabeth Moon, which was picked by a different member who couldn't make it tonight. She unfortunately didn't get to finish the book, so I'm taking over. And nobody read a physical copy, so we haven't got a cover to show, but that's okay. I didn't think the cover was all that interesting anyway.
It'll be on the thumbnail.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's get started on general opinions. Bobby.
I enjoyed the book. I had a lot of kind of a roller coaster experience reading it, though. I'd be interested to, given that we're all women here, and it was about a female character and her experience as a female in what seemed to be quite a heavily male and patriarchal culture. I would be very interested to hear there were a couple of times where I was just like, I don't know if I can keep reading it. If it's going to be like this the whole way through, it's going to be really upsetting, and I don't know if I can deal. And that happened a couple of times. So I'm really glad that in the end I was happy with the way it ended, and which was, yeah, because like there was one point where I thought, oh crap, like the second time when the shuttle crew turns up and the way and everything, I was like, oh god, please don't end on this could go two different ways. Please have the better ending. And in my opinion, she picked the better ending, so that was nice. It ended on for me like on a hopeful note, so that was nice.
Awesome.
Yes, and I did the audio version. I quite enjoyed the audio version. Yeah.
Sarah?
Yeah, I was just giggling away. I don't know if Bobby could see my face, but she wrote something in the chat which made me crack up. I only looked at it today because I only got to like the end of chapter 18 today. So I was like, I don't want to look at this now. But let me just read this out to our audience, our huge amounts of audience so quickly. You said, yes. I got to the two, so Bobby says, yes, I got to the 2-hour mark, and I'm now back to my starting emotion of my grumpy and everything is awful, because I just went, yes, this is why I put this down 2 years ago and did not pick it up after the first hour, because yes. I was like, I hate it, like not her, but I'm like, this is horrible, this is like shit, is this like, oh, I just went on and on, but yeah, I persevered, and then everyone effed off and left the planet, thank God. So it was good. And then, yeah, when the shuttle crew arrived, yeah, started getting incredibly pissed off again, and just was like, oh, this is just also frustrating. And I did have to suspend my disbelief with it, and also just imagine it was kind of a, you don't know where civilization goes, but this parallel world of, I guess, company men and women, and I'll get into it in my in when we start getting into what the scientific in big inverted commas said crew. But generally, I did the audiobook too. I thought the narrator was really good. I wasn't confused over whoever was speaking. I thought she did really good different accents and tones, and for Ophelia, she had this really sort of lowered her voice and slowed her pace, and just, yeah, really, really excellent narration. So that always makes a big difference to books if you have a really, a good narrator. And it was strong. And finally, I was actually surprised in a really pleased way. I don't know what this says, but this was written in 1996. I thought this was only written a couple of years ago, because I only thought they did the audio. I think they only just did the audiobook. So why this got a resurgence, I don't know. But I was like, yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, so that was cool.
I thought it was 2003, but I must have got the wrong date. Elizabeth.
I was strangely ambivalent about this book. It was fine. I'm not sure why I didn't like it more, actually, because like it was the sort of story that I should really enjoy, but I don't know, maybe it was just the mood I was reading it in. I was just like, yeah, it's fine, it's readable. Yeah, and I think it was interesting to read it in such close proximity to Left Hand of Darkness as well. I feel like, yeah, this I don't know what it is about it, but I just felt like there was some cross-pollination happening there. definitely lots to relate to. And I'm looking forward to getting further into the discussion because even though I felt ambivalent about the book, I think it'll be a really good discussion.
Kirsten?
I really enjoyed this book. I don't know if I need to add making friends with the aliens to my like favorite tropes list because oh man, I love it. That was my favorite part of the book, was the whole her kind of building up this relationship with the aliens and them figuring out the communication and all of that stuff. I absolutely loved that. I really liked her as a character. I really enjoyed her being this is so, especially right at the beginning, not right at the beginning, but right after all the people went, and she's like, I'm just gonna not wear underwear and I'm gonna chuck out my shoes and I loved that whole her being able to feel like she could finally just do what she wanted and how freeing that was for her. And yeah, towards the end, I got really stressed out when she started saying that other voice had gone away, and I'm like, no, you can't let that other voice go away. That was freaking me out, and I was getting stressed out because I was like, if something happens to these baby aliens, I'm going to be so angry and I'm not going to be wanting to finish the book, but it was okay. But I really, really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Lisa?
I literally finished it 5 minutes ago.
Yeah,
Good timing.
Good work.
Yeah, that's why I'm a little late, because I was like, I gotta finish the book. I want to do the whole discussion. So I also did the audiobook for most of it. And then yesterday, Barbara and I were chatting and I realized there's no way I can do 4 more hours of audiobook before tonight. So I quickly actually just bought the Kindle book. I love the audiobook voices. I really enjoyed the way the reader actually did the voice of Blue Cloak. That was really cool. I just really related to Ophelia's character. And I love that I love how real she was. Like, it's like, yeah, this is a human being, who has all the feelings, not just the feelings that they're supposed to have as an old woman and stuff like that, like, yeah, I'm cranky at you and like, get over yourself sort of thing. It's like, I love this. Yeah, I actually did have really enjoyed the book. And it's been, I think what contributed to how much I was able to really enjoy it is it's been my switch off book, because I've been listening to it as I drove home from work. So therefore that's made me look forward to the next installment of the story more. I think that's part of that. Yeah. So yeah. I do feel a little like maybe it's almost like a dystopian futuristic because of just how disrespectful so many of the humans are. Like, I find that quite disturbing. But the other stuff carried me past that. So yeah.
This was a second read for me, and I'm interested to talk about the different audio because I have an older version of the audio, so I've got some interesting questions around that. Definitely did audio both times, same audio though, so I didn't hear the different version. But adored it. Once again, Ophelia is just like a rock star character in my opinion, and she's what makes the book, honestly. Like I can understand if people have criticism for other elements of the stories and things along those lines, but you can't criticize Ophelia. Because yeah, just adore her so much. But yes, I was very, very happy when Liv picked it because I was like, I've been wanting to reread that. So I just poured through it and couldn't really put it down again. So it just justified in my own head that I was like, yeah, love this as much as I thought. So I actually ended up buying the ebook because I wanted to know how to spell some of the words so that I could write notes. So I was like, I don't know how to spell some of this stuff. And I'm glad I did because it was there was quite some different spellings for some things that I didn't really expect. But I also discovered that I don't think I would have enjoyed it so much if I hadn't had the audio. I feel like the audio and having Ophelia's voice in this story is one of the things that just makes it like perfect. And so, yeah, I was reading some of the ebook because I was like, oh, well, I'll just keep going even though I'm not driving, because I almost always drive if I'm doing audio. And I was like, oh, I don't like this as much. So yeah, I think the audio book really, really makes this one. So anybody out there, if you don't go any further than this, I'm highly recommending the audio, even if you're not normally an audiobook person.
I imagine I wouldn't have got the pacing of her voice properly if I had read it. I would have probably, because I tend to read voices very quickly, and she speaks in a very measured, very like, I suspect it's a little put on, because when she's speaking out loud, she's either speaking to people trying to understand her for the first time. So of course she's going to pace herself and not use a natural speaking speed, or she's on purpose trying to slow down to avoid people jumping to conclusions too quickly, to sort of, in a, like almost like a diplomat would sort of manipulate the situation to pace it to their liking so that they can have certain things fall into the right place at the right time. So I don't know that I would have got that pacing correctly if I'd read the book.
I think she was doing that on purpose with when the shuttle crew were there.
Yeah.
She was kind of like playing into the stupid
Yeah.
old thing on purpose, which I really loved. I really liked how she was like, well, this is how they're going to see me, so I'm just gonna let them see what they want to see, and yeah,
work the angle.
But even when she was talking to the people, the friends, I liked how much explanation there was, or like her thinking around things, like, oh, well, I'm gonna, oh, well, they're trying to learn like little, she doesn't know how else to relate. She's like, oh, they're trying to learn like little children, so I will speak to them. Like, I loved all that, like that narrative. Yeah, I appreciated it.
Yeah, I actually liked the fact that she would acknowledge that she was thinking like she would deal with little children, but then also recognizing that they weren't little children at the same time. And so there was always that dichotomous element of every time she was talking to the people in that
Was your
respect.
takeaway that they were teenagers because they had the curiosity, like the thriving for the knowledge, because they were still kind of young, and so in that way they did strike me, and we have somebody who has a teenager in the room, that they kind of were teenagers in that they didn't clean up, they didn't think, and it wasn't until blue cloak. Thank you. I was like going, it's not coat. What is it? Blue cloak turned up and was just like, what's wrong with you? Who raised you? I was like going, clean up. Would you do this in your own village? And it was just great. I thought it was so, like, it was so obvious. It was
even
really
things
great.
like stand aside for her, you can hear that, understand that.
Get her a glass of water.
I don't know if they were, I imagine them as teenagers, but they were definitely meant to be young, because there was that whole part about the reason she was the only one that could be like the aunt role, whatever it's Kia or whatever say it.
Best guardian.
Was because she had children and she was older, and they needed that role to be fulfilled by somebody who had already had children and they'd grown up and they were like an older mentor. And none of the others that were there were able to be in that role, because none of them were old enough and none of them had children before. So they were definitely young. I don't know whether
I was going for early 20s sort of in my mind.
I was originally I thought early 20s, because when they were having the discussion about who would go, like who could go explore, I thought, oh, it's early 20s, and they've got a lot of skills, but possibly in this nomadic society as well, you gain those skills really, really quickly. And we've learned that they're a very highly intelligent, very capable of learning and adapting race of people. So but reflecting on what happened when Blue Cloak showed up, it's just really, really interesting. So I was just kind of like, teenagers are a wide range from 13 right through to 19. So who knows exactly quite where in the young.
I was quite teenage in some regards till I was in my early 20s too. Like
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, no,
yeah.
I know heaps of early 20-year-olds who are not very good about
Yeah.
seeing what they should be doing around them and things like that. But
Yeah,
they're old
yeah.
enough to be out and about in the world. So it's sort of
Yeah,
this.
fair enough. Yeah.
yeah. Well, there's that description right, which I've just read a few minutes ago of the development of those first three babies, children. This thing of the discussion about the tail and how like the stripes in the tail and then there's an awkward stumpy tail period, which that sounds very teenage, doesn't it? Like early mid-teenage, perhaps. I don't know.
Or even like teasing for children.
Oh,
Yeah, I was kind of thinking like the tyrannical three, like that kind of pushing the boundaries, but like because the development's going to be completely different. So
but it's very clear, like we don't know how long they take to develop into those different age groups and things.
And certain things might develop faster than other type, certain emotional intelligence actually takes everyone's still developing emotional intelligence, so yeah.
I mean,
But as
sorry, I was just gonna say I didn't attribute a specific age to the fully formed ones who first turned up, because I mean, like, it honestly, they could have fallen into the trope of the scientist who is so interested in what they're learning that they don't pay attention to anything else. They're so absorbed in figuring something out that they're being really culturally rude, or from like a social perspective being very rude even for their own culture, and they wouldn't have picked up on it because they're just so absorbed in this new fancy shiny thing that they don't, like this new Rubik's Cube that they're trying to figure out.
Like the humans who showed up, because they were also like the scientifically minded ones were so rude and not even aware that they're
yeah. I mean,
I think with humans was a little different. I think with the humans, a lot of their what we see as inappropriateness, they thought was perfectly fine because they viewed Ophelia as stupid, uneducated, beneath them. She was both a woman and she was older and not educated, so that just further marginalized, like put her below.
And they also thought she was crazy.
But also the way that, as soon as they learn anything about the aliens, it was all like scientific curiosity rather than, they have babies, can we see them, or what's their bone structure or something. It was like
that part made me so worried. I was like,
I was worried,
trying to draw a parallel.
What are they going to do?
I was like that. But I mean, but even with that, there was scientific curiosity, but they still approached Ophelia's information, her field information that she had gathered, as being not worthy of their consideration. Explicitly told them multiple times, you're not actually speaking to them. See, you can't even pronounce it properly. You don't have any training. You're not made for this. So
that was the most frustrating part of the novel for me, and the bit where I actually had to suspend my disbelief and remind myself this is a parallel universe where whatever developments we've had might be different. Like we've already shown that in where Ophelia's community has been set up and the settlers have been sent. They've got a very patriarchal society, so that's already showing some differences. And then to have this scientific crew turn up that have actually almost very little curiosity and not realizing this, we all know scientists. There are scientists in this group, and the thing that I am always struck by is that it's exactly what Belong says isn't accurate, which is this thirst for learning and that, wanting to be taught. And there was this argument, I remember, Belong's telling her, oh no, that's not how it all works. And it's kind of like going, and the first thing I wanted her to say was, and how many children have you had and you've, raised? I was like, experience versus practical versus theory type thing. And I mean, a lot of people, I know it was set up with that Kira chapter, which was kind of an interesting point of view. I'm not sure
I have to talk about that.
Yeah, I thought you might. But, I had to suspend my disbelief in terms of that this was a different world with a different background. So these scientists had I guess a much more biased black and white view than scientists that we might know or their thirst for knowledge. I'm not saying all scientists are perfect or whatever, but that I'm pretty sure a lot of stories that people would have stories in the past, you recognize that this is an asset. Oh my God, this is an access point, right? That's how they just didn't seem to sort of realize that. You're like, oh, what is, and that's the biggest part that I kind of was like, I'm getting really, really annoyed and grumpy with all of you. So that was
well, but I mean, even Belong, Belong didn't have any field experience of any kind. There was there was an internal monologue that Ophelia was having as she was listening to Belong, and it clicked for Ophelia that Belong didn't have any first-hand experience with Indigenous languages. It was all computer generated, so it was whatever a human-built computer could have figured out how to build. That's all of their research was based on that. But that's how all these scientists, that was what all their experience with theoretical perceive, because they'd never come into contact with an alien.
There was a lot of hubris involved in terms of their general standpoints and beliefs in terms of their capabilities to do the job, because this was their first instance of first contact, and yet they came in with this sort of confidence that they knew what they were doing. Even Kira, right when she first started out, and she was all sort of being very judgmental about everybody around her and all of that sort of stuff. It was very clear that there was just this belief that she knew what she was doing. I was like, the reality of the situation is none of you know what the freaking hell you're doing.
Yeah. I think it was also that Belong conversation obviously went up my back in a really annoying way when she talked about normal children. But it was also that aspect of, this is what the textbook says, so it's true. This is, as opposed to and that's what I was kind of like, here's somebody who's been around a lot of children, and raised a lot of children, and is sort of saying, this is my experience, and you're saying, oh no, that's not how it is because I have learned it that way. That was very
very Dunning-Kruger effect. It's like, I know what I know, and therefore I'm super confident. It's like, well, you don't know what you don't know.
Which is where I came up against a wall as far as scientific inquisition is, which is, most scientists go, the more I find out, the more I don't know, and it's all about the questions, right? It's all it's just so many, I know we're all most of us, I don't know if all of us are, a big fan of Hank Green, and he is a classic example, always talking about, he always says, people think that scientists are keeping the information from you. You can't shut scientists up. They are dying to tell you all the things, and I just always think about, and it's so true. They're like, you ask them a question, they want to tell you everything, and they want to know everything. And so that's where I kind of was like, this is a different world with a different, and it's come from a different place. You can see that with this colony. You can see the fact that this is basically a company. This isn't governments, these are companies that are, have got contracts and are sending in scientists. Not saying that doesn't happen, because it still happens here, of course, mining companies and whatnot, but Elizabeth, that chapter with Kira, I would like to know what your thoughts, because I kind of was like, oh, this is interesting, and then that was all we got. So I was like, so that was my
one of the things that frustrated me about this story was Kira not realizing how she is like Ophelia in many ways, like the way that the other people treat her, particularly. She's like Ophelia, and yet she never recognizes that. I feel like it was like setting up like the I guess class structure, but more like intellectual elitism. In that, because you have this figure that Kira's like a short step away from Ophelia, really, especially in comparison to the rest of the characters. But she has been educated in a way that Ophelia hasn't, and that's all she sees, really. And so I found that very frustrating.
I thought it was really interesting, like whenever with the difference between Kira and Ophelia reminded me a lot of the differences that sometimes you experience with other women in your friendship group who either like have not shared your experience, maybe because of where they are in their in their whatever timeline, or because they were privileged enough, or maybe, for example, if you have I think what's coming to mind right this very moment is whenever there was a big push in Hollywood around the Big Bang Theory, where people were trying to ask the female actors about sexism, because it was during the whole Me Too movement had just come out, and these three women who were meant to be playing, like the two scientists who should have experienced a lot of sexism or whatever, and they were like, oh well, I guess I've just never experienced sexism, and it was like this total tone deafness, and because they had just been so privileged that they hadn't noticed that they had experienced sexism was really what it was. It was what kind of that difference between Ophelia and Kira always made me think of in the book. I was reading, I was like, it's happening to you. You haven't picked up on it yet. Like this thing of Kira had not stopped to think about, oh my God, when I'm old, that could happen to me, until it was smacked in her face as the actual reality.
And even then, she doesn't really click that it's the same thing.
It took so long. Yeah.
Like, she's like, oh, it's so frustrating the way they treat me. But, like, she doesn't go, oh, that's the way they're treating Ophelia as well.
Yeah. Well, and she kind of just sort of was like, well, they treat me that way, but whatever. As opposed to Ophelia, who's very angry. Like, we get in her internal monologue that she sees this, it's very frustrating. She knows it's not right. And so she tries and makes her way to set her life up so she doesn't have to deal with it anymore.
Would Ophelia, just putting it out there, and there's really no way to know, nor perhaps any correct answer here, but wondering whether when Ophelia was Kira's age and still immersed in that community, if she'd really processed it before she'd had listened to the other voice.
I think she did.
She also did the whole, there was a lot of early in the book, which I found really hard, was the whole, oh, I'll just be quiet because that prevents conflict, or what, like she had these behaviors. I mean,
but it was also the society. It was made quite clear that she was in a society and came from a culture where if you weren't quiet, you met the back of a hand.
Yeah.
I think the part of the problem too is it's hard to know exactly how Ophelia would have been with somebody who was elderly, because she had come to this planet at a fairly early age.
She was one of the first colonists. Yeah, she was one of the first, because they asked her, Sarah Ophelia, how did you come? How did you arrive? How did you bring your belongings? Yeah.
And they wouldn't have, because they came from Earth directly, they wouldn't have had elderly at that stage, unlike when they were being transferred this time around. And so while there were probably people older than her, they probably weren't significantly older to really sort of test that about her. So it's hard to sort of know.
I think she was, there's a little bit in the sort of ish around the middle of the book when she's thinking back on her earlier years and about how she remembers always being the child who was told she was too loud, she was too brash, and so she sort of hid it, but she also went off and had a dalliance, right? Her first sexual partner was someone she was madly in love with, not the person she ended up marrying, because she chose to be with this person that she was madly in love with. So she was sort of breaking rules even early on, whereas I don't know if Kira does any of that rule breaking. We don't learn that, we never see that about her, but I would assume that we're supposed to think that Kira doesn't. She just sort of goes, oh, this is annoying, but continues on because she doesn't think it could be any other way, whereas Ophelia seems to remember that she was always questioning and noticing and sort of in some ways making her own path.
Yeah, I think what I would have liked, I found that chapter interesting from Kira's point of view, and I feel that from a resolution point of view, another, I don't know, post log or whatever, or something from Kira's point of view, seeing the situation would have been quite useful, because it just, yeah, I hadn't drawn some of these very excellent conclusions and comparisons that I'm hearing from the group. And this is why we have book clubs. And I think I would have found it more useful and more impactful if we'd had that kind of reflection again from Kira, because she did a lot of reflecting about the power struggles, and that was really useful because it sort of set up, oh, this is a company, this isn't really just for scientific endeavor, this is because, you know, the fact that they had a military force with them. So I would have liked that, and maybe it was there originally and then got pulled out, who knows.
I think my thing is that it might have helped somewhat, because I feel like Kira's resolution at the end is an unearned one. She gets essentially the happy ending. That really is just because she's the least despicable of the group. And I feel like that's not really an earned ending for her. So perhaps having had that perspective would have helped to make that feel a bit more earned.
I wonder if it is like it's that it's not on screen, like, because Ophelia takes her aside and is like, look,
Yeah.
you gotta get your guy while you can, for your happily ever after. And I think maybe it's Kira, the end of Kira's arc, that she listens this time and is like, sees the wisdom that Ophelia does have to offer.
It's just more that I didn't. It just felt like a way to get the ending done, rather than necessarily something that I was like, oh yes, this is. You never sort of get a moment in return from Kira that is sort of an acknowledgement of, thank you, Ophelia, or yes, you're right, Ophelia, or, you know, even just her at some point just asking an Ophelia a question and seeking her advice rather than being given advice. But would have probably done it. But yeah, I'm being super picky to say it though, because I don't really care that much.
Do you recall that I don't think Ophelia had actually intended to be particularly friendly to Kira until Blue Cloak had apparently said it's okay for someone to hold one of the babies, and she wasn't happy with it, but Ophelia was but Kira was the gentlest, and the baby liked Kira, so Ophelia's thinking, well, the baby likes her, so I suppose I should make an effort to like her. And maybe that was where that kindness was coming from, because without that, I don't know if Ophelia would have bothered with Kira really.
Yeah. When one of the babies was looking, it chose Kira and licked her and decided that Kira was fine. That you're right. That towards the very end. Yeah. And I think I think also because Kira was it wasn't that Blue Cloak said it was all right for her to hold the baby. It was that Blue Cloak said she's going to become she will be the next nest guardian. Yeah. And so I think Ophelia went, well, then I probably need to make sure she's got the tools to do this, because I don't want her screwing up my babies, kind of thing. Is more the impression I
got on that. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think also she'd seen, you know, Ophelia had been doing reflection about her role as a mother and a grandmother, and seeing these children she hadn't really enjoyed that role. Like, and I had to I did reflect and agree when she was like, I'm wanting to work on my hobbies and these kids are getting in the way, which is, you know, I was talking about the I don't want to call them aliens, because they're not, it's their world. That really annoyed me, by the way. The people. Thank you. The people, when the people kept getting in the way, I was like, I hear you, I'm there, I just want to do this thing.
I was like, shut the fridge, and I'm like, oh my god, it's my life.
I was like, I had this, and I turned around and you've broken it, damn it. So yeah,
sorry, go ahead, keep going. Sorry.
No, I've lost my thought train. No, it's all good.
I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff that could have been impacted. I liked the focus the story had. There were all these little nods to things that you could have totally written an entire half of a book, gone into like a whole new section of a book about. Like, because and it reminded me when you were saying, Sarah, how she was getting frustrated because like she'd already had kids and she's like, I'm too old for this bullshit, right? And and she's like, I just want to work on my hobbies and stuff. But then after a while, she was reflecting on her childhood and on her time as a parent, and she realized, she's like, actually, I'm not very satisfied with how my parenting went. And it's because of all this stuff that I went through. I parented as I had been parented, and thinking back on it, that was not great. And if I had had the time to stop and reflect, I probably would have parented differently in that moment.
It's basically exactly that same conversation she has with Belong, is this argument of going, oh no, they're born wanting, was it the learning versus being taught thing? And her going, I accepted everything as gospel as well. What if I didn't? Because here's a people with an entirely different way of looking at these things. What if I took on more of that? And I think that was what my thought was. I think that's again why she was like with Kira going, I need to also look at this as an opportunity to help someone come into this role, as opposed to like, she's going to be here, and the best way is to kind of look at this instead of it being, because it's kind of that, because she talks about Rosario in that sentence and saying, so she's like, well, she's maybe, for her, it's like she could be a better daughter or daughter-in-law, but it's that kind of, I think for me, it was that parallel of going, what if I could do that again and have a different attitude and outlook and mindset about that role? And so, because it's going to be different from this patriarchal society where it was always done this way. We just, instead of, pushing against, because there's a real theme of pushing against tradition, and the way it's always been done is the way it should always be done, which I think is really, it's probably one of the big things we're all resonating with this, because that's exactly what we should do.
Mel, we went into this little bit of a discussion because you were saying, there was a bit of like a potted happy ending or something, but or she had the ending that Kira had the ending she maybe hadn't earned. How could you? Was there, in your mind, was there a different kind of ending or outcome that it was heading towards?
No. I was quite happy with the ending overall. I mean, it was a little bit like it was all, everything's well done and all of it. But at the same time, I kind of liked that because I knew that there wouldn't be a second book. So I was like, yay. No, it's fine. It's just more along the lines of, I probably would have enjoyed a moment to show Kira earning it, like some sort of acknowledgement, some sort of change. I felt like it's like in that moment where they were locked in the children's learning center area, and Kira and Orison were being quite reasonable about the situation and everything on those lines. It's about the best that you get for sort of showing that they've changed in that respects, because they're really pushing back against Vasily, I think,
Vasil.
It's just that it's spelled Vasil, so I'm sort of like,
I was just remembering the way it was said, and it sounded kind of like Vasily.
Vasil, yeah.
Vasil, yeah.
It might be the Lakisi that you're remembering with the I on the end, because that's his last name.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Anyway, he like, you've got that dichotomy, and so that's sort of what it leans on in terms of sort of justifying the situation and sorry, the ending with Kira and everything. And of course, Belong, and this is something I have a little bit of a problem with in terms of how she dealt with it. Belong gets almost punished for being interested in Lakisi in the first place, in some respects. She even though in a lot of respects Belong was no better than Kira, or sorry, no worse than Kira in terms of like how she treated Ophelia, how she thought about science and thought about people around her and stuff. Her problem was that she was young and working her attractiveness and trying to get her man and all of that sort of stuff. And I felt like that was a bit mean to Belong, overall. But
yeah, I think it was also possibly a commentary, and again, it was a bit tough here in a patriarchal society, and people have to use what skills or what life's given to them, and that's often, and that sadly has been the way it has been for women for thousands of years, right? But I did think there was I think for Belong, she knew she was not as experienced as everybody else, and that came out. She wasn't any less keen, but she was really relying on her theory as opposed to the practice and absorbing and trying, she's sort of less kind of trying to prove her place there. But I think that this is where that kind of, we're in a parallel world. She's having to move back on, well, I will attach myself to a man of power, because that will ensure that that's how I kind of read that situation, is that it was really about that. I am trying, it's to ensure that I have a place, because I don't really feel like I am on the same path, because she wasn't. That's how I'm going to keep that, because that is also what has happened in patriarchal societies for hundreds of thousands of years, is that is a way for women to gain power and respect, is to attach themselves to a man of power and means. And I sort of read it that way. And I agree with you, Mel, because it is a bit unfair to Belong, in considering that this is the society that's been set up for her. This is what life's dealt her, and she's just dealing the best cards that she could. Considering her, so that's what I'm trying to say, is like, I completely agree with you. I can see where it's kind of coming from, but I think that was, I was just going to say, I think that was the side of Ophelia, because you can see how Ophelia was kind of judging Linda. Read about Linda. So I'm like, she's just judging Belong the same way, which is a bit unfair, but people are unfair to others,
I think that's part of the story, though, is about how we do make those judgments, and Ophelia is not free of that.
No,
which is perfect. She's not a perfect human being, so yeah.
I mean, so I might have missed any other cues about Belong. The thing that I specifically remember, like, of a conversation that I took away from how aware of Belong's actions is Belong, like how aware is Belong of her own behavior, was the conversation where she went to Ophelia because she wanted to just unload to someone who she didn't think was gonna, who was very who was particularly inconsequential. She just kind of wanted to offload her thoughts, and Ophelia directly asked her, "Don't you like whoever?" And she was like, "Oh no, that's just how I behave." And and my understanding from that discussion was that Belong, and I might have missed other things that contradicted that, but I got the impression from that interaction that Belong was very oblivious to her own behavior, and she hadn't decided on anyone. It was just how she acted. In which case, I would argue that she's not attempting to attach herself to any one person. It's just how she behaves. That's a little different.
No,
and
she actually does say at one point that she's attached to one of them. She just doesn't say which one at the time.
Yeah, she said, and because Ophelia directly asked her, because Ophelia's had enough, she says, "Are you having sex with them?" And that's where Belong goes, oh, and doesn't really that's really private. And she's like, "Well, you're sharing all of this. I'm just like, let's get to the heart of the matter." Okay. Yeah, so she actually asks that, and I got the sense from that was she actually was, because she flushed deep. She didn't want to answer the question. She said it was private, so I took that to mean, okay, this is, if you would say you would.
No, I'm not.
No, where she's like, oh, that's, where it's kind of like, you've called a spade and said, okay. And I think you're right, though, to a certain extent. She isn't quite aware of her actions. She's not doing it in terms of a
she's not being outright manipulative.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it was more like, this is what I've got, and this is how, like, even probably
she's
back on her home world.
She's behaving like a normal young girl does.
Her
She's
home
flirting
world
with all the men. And
in her home world, she always did these things when men were around, because that's how she, probably got self-worth. at the time. So
Were you
I'm making a lot of assumptions about a character written in 1996. I'm just saying.
were you going to say something to that, Elizabeth? I thought.
Yeah. So yeah, Liz, what were you gonna say?
But yeah, they do ask. I mean, Ophelia also asks her, like, because Bailong says something about they about them thinking that she's flirting with them, and I thought Ophelia asked as well, "Are you flirting with them?" and she says she kind of is a bit evasive with her answer. So I felt like that implied some degree of manipulation in that, like she's making a play for both the guys and hedging her bets.
I definitely feel like there was some hedging of bets in that. I just don't think that it's necessarily like serious full-on manipulations. It's just sort of I'm figuring things out and playing around with it a bit. It's not like I'm taking them both to the far ends and then I'm going to play them against each other, kind of thinking, strategically in her head. It's young girl flirting. I don't know which one I really want, but I think this one's the best one, really, kind of feeling to me. Like I don't take it too seriously, because I think a young girl who's pretty like that and is appealing to men at that age is like that, for better or worse. That's what they have to figure it out for themselves at some point. Like, do they want that kind of attention and stuff? And
I've also known plenty of young girls who did that, who were absolutely trying to stir the pot because it was fun for them.
I just didn't get that feel from her at all, like that she was doing it for fun. I felt like she was doing it because she didn't know what she wanted.
I definitely thought there was manipulation. There's definitely manipulation, but is it on the evil? I'm going to, I'm playing the thing. I'm then going to, blackmail them later with this. Like, it wasn't to that extent.
No, it's a thoughtless level.
She's
I have
a
question though. I mean, evil though, like.
I don't think she was evil. Do you think she was evil?
No. You said like playing them off against each other, sort of for evil. I'm like, people who do that do not consider themselves evil. They're just acting in their own interest, which is what Bailong is doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying what she was doing was good. I'm saying that it's not uncommon and it's not like really, really bad. It's just, and these men who are older, and they're the ones who in the end are falling for this stupidly. Like,
yeah,
I think there was too much blame put on Belong for what was going on, rather than the men who were participating in it.
That's bang on. Good point, Mel. Like, let the older, more experienced men are somehow getting away with not taking responsibility for their actions and falling for this shit. Like, they should be seeing what's going on, for what was going on. And let's be honest, I am the leader of this mission, should know better than to screw around with one of the people on the mission. So
and I feel like the same can be said for Morrison, because he ends up with Kira, and Kira's very happy about all of that and all of that sort of stuff. But I'm like, did you want Belong's secondhand like guy? Like, is that what you really wanted? But I was like, you know what? Let's just leave it. She's happy, she's fine, it's all good, sort of thing. But I was just like,
I felt a little bit more about that relationship.
I felt like he came off as the nice guy out of the situation and everything. But again, that was because nobody put any blame for what the flirting and interaction and stuff that was going on between him and Belong. But in the end, I'm sorry, the men were more at blame than Belong, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Totally. And I don't know. I was just going to say, in my fantasy, I just thought Kira and what's his name, RC, just kind of developed a relationship that was probably more of equals in the long run, because they seem to be more like that. Sorry, Bobby.
I was going to say, we know very little about these men. Everything we know about these men is what we observe through mainly Ophelia and a little bit through Kira, which I mean, I don't recall there being anything written through the point of view of Belong.
No,
that's true. Wrong, but I don't recall that there was anything. So the only information we get about these men is through the eyes of the two women that they treat not very well. They don't seem to do much bad treating that we can see to Belong. They're too busy oogling or whatever. So like,
But that's still bad treatment, isn't it? But unfortunately, it's
Yeah, the
It's
Orison only
patriarchal.
ended up ahead.
it's still preferential treatment. It is preferential treatment.
Yeah.
I'm not, so it's inappropriate treatment all around, yes, but that's preferential treatment to the one who they have, who they have an interest in some way.
Orison only really came ahead because he was more polite to Ophelia than Lakisi was. So
yeah,
and he didn't try and like murder a child to get
that
out of the
too,
room.
but that was kind of it was established before that moment happened, though. So
yeah. I did enjoy that part in the end chapter where I'm sorry, I'm going to ask again. Is it Orison or
Orison?
Orison. I don't know, because I didn't see anything written down, and there was a lot of first and last names all at the same time. So I just kind of like I never got confused who anybody was, but it just sort of let the names wash over me. I did enjoy the interaction about, well, so so we'll tell you and you'll tell them. No, the other way around. Like, I enjoyed that very much. And so, like, oh, and so, well, how are they going to, understand our policy? Because you're not writing it. It's just great. And I was like, okay, I'm enjoying, like, as much of all the bullshit, like, you're not making the plans here, buddy. This is their world, not yours. So I and that's, I enjoyed that kind of, that was just a really nice comeuppance to all the arrogance that we had just seen over. Like, this is so I very much enjoyed that.
It was a good reckoning.
yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to go, guys. Sorry, it's not.
Okay.
I have to go pick up my kid. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for your insights.
Bye. It was really lovely talking. I'm looking forward to watching the rest of this afterwards.
Kirsten, did you have any things that you wanted to, because you haven't had much chance to?
I, to be honest, didn't find all of the interactions between the shuttle crew stuff all that interesting.
No, it wasn't.
That was my least favorite part of this. I like all of the conversation about, who's with who. I don't give a shit, honestly. I really enjoyed. My favorite part of the book was the whole her and the people figuring each other out, and the clash of cultures and figuring out each other's cultures. I really, really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the working out the communication and how it built, and that was my favorite part about it. I did get really frustrated when the shuttle crew showed up with the whole, like, especially the whole part about the language. It's like, she's been speaking to these people and they're like, oh, you don't really understand what they're saying. I'm like,
and they've been speaking to her, like they've been learning the language.
Oh, I meant to say, I didn't get a chance to say it before, but you guys were talking about like the language part, and it cracked me up that the people were doing this thing where they were like standing in the spots where they knew they were trying to collect the audio, and they were just like, we're just going to make sounds. And just,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
I thought that was amazing. I loved that.
It was really good. Yeah.
Great throwing for sure.
Yeah. And that they didn't know, it's like, we're leading you on a merry goose chase.
But going back to what you're saying, Kirsten, about the interactions, once Blue Cloak turned up, obviously everything started to really change and progress a lot more and everything. What I did think, though, that was interesting was I felt like they were learning from Ophelia, but they weren't really doing much in the reverse.
You mean before Blue Cloak came?
No. Even while Blue Cloak was there, it was only when Blue Cloak pulled her out of the village and said, "You're going to be the Click Claw Cur, and that you're going to be the person to talk to them for us, because we need to have protection, and you're going to be the one that protects us, and this is your responsibility, and the babies and all of that sort of stuff." That's the only point where they actually started communicating back to her. And then it was info dump moment, because she stayed out there for ages and they were like telling her everything.
Yeah, but I think that's possibly why Blue Cloak, because they talked to Blue Cloak, it was the singer, was the person who does the
Yes.
communication, and I wonder whether it was a respect thing or a training and who knows, but that wasn't the role of those who came before. They were there to observe. They
Oh
weren't
no,
there
I know, but I'm talking
Yeah,
mostly
yeah.
about Ophelia and Blue Cloak. While Blue Cloak
okay.
was there, Blue Cloak was learning from Ophelia lots, but wasn't doing much imparting until that stage where
Yeah,
she pulled her
yeah.
out of the village and said, "Okay, here we go."
Yeah,
But
yeah.
which sort of
And-
made
and-
up for it. But I did notice it while it was going on. I was sort of like,
Yeah. And in fairness, Ophelia said that too when they said, oh, there's cities, and they're like, Blue Cloak, then why did Blue Cloak not mention the cities?
Yeah.
And I do
Yeah.
remember when the youngsters were leaving, and they were talking, cryptically, but I thought, I'm sure this will all make sense at the end. I'm going to try and not get too caught up in what they're saying, because they were talking about those who are this or those who are that. And I'm pretty sure they mentioned the cities. They mentioned those on the coast, those who live in So
I think-
when they mentioned it later, I was like, oh, I remember them talking about that when they were having a round table about whether they were going to come or not. So yeah,
a drumming.
a drumming. Thank you.
What
I
did
actually, we have to go down that avenue in a minute, but that's fine. Keep going.
Oh
was there
yeah,
something you were about to say, Kirsten?
Sorry, I just think a lot of that was trust, because you got to remember these, like, they didn't trust Ophelia quite yet at that
Sure.
point. They didn't
Yeah.
trust her until she showed that, like, she was like, you can use one of these houses to have as a nest. And that was the reason why that it changed there, was because they began to trust her, because up until that point they were like, you're interesting and we can learn from you, but like, you might still be a monster, and your people went and slaughtered a bunch of babies. And so they were learning from her, but they weren't ready to give her more of their culture or their knowledge, because they didn't know if they could trust her yet. And I think that moment when she was like, I'm going to open up one of these houses, I'm going to help you make a safe place for the babies, I think that was a turning point for them to realize that she was really different and that she could be trusted. Like, I know they knew that she was different because they said that from the beginning. That's why they didn't just kill her straight out, but they were still wary and they were still holding back a bit. For good
Which is
bloody
fair
reason.
and fine. I just more think that it's if they were lucky that Ophelia was just fine giving them information, because I think that if you had someone more reserved, there wasn't a lot of sort of back and forth to develop trust equal ways, which is, I understand why they're wary, but Ophelia has right to be wary as well.
yeah.
Especially considered how outnumbered she is.
Yeah. And she did mention, in fairness, I don't know if I said this before, that why didn't Blue, I said that before, sorry, that why didn't Blue Cloak mention this, why didn't Blue Cloak mention that? I do think it was also partially a narrative device that she didn't know. So I do think there is a bit of
I think
of that if she did know all of that stuff, it was almost too much for her to go and talk to the other. And that was Blue Cloak's wisdom in saying, I'm not going to give you all of this because I can see you got a lot on your mind as Click Clock here and dealing with the other humans, because it was like literally like what, 1 day, 2 days before they showed up that they'd only just trusted her to be the Click Clear. So maybe that was the other thing. But I do
in a condensed period.
Yeah. I do know what you mean, but it also might be because it was easier for them to learn her language than the other way around.
That was one thing I did consider, was that because she couldn't learn their language, they needed to learn hers before they could communicate back.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Anyway, it was just something I noticed.
Yeah.
I think also she was probably less curious about their culture and their knowledge than they were about hers, because she was kind of just like, I'm just happy chilling and doing my thing. She probably wasn't asking a lot of the right questions, and yes, they could have told her the information and just given it to her, but I feel like she probably wasn't asking as many questions of them as they were of her, just because they were so curious about everything that they were more likely to be asking her this and this and this and
Well,
this.
she lampshades that too. Like when the scientists arrive, she's like, "Oh, I didn't think to ask that really relevant question that the scientists wanted to know," sort of thing.
Yeah,
this is true.
But,
I think also you're right. Sorry.
In terms of the trusting thing, though, I was impressed with how open-eyed she was, because when she was in the first, I think, couple of 2 to 3 weeks maybe of working with the young ones when they show up, for want of a better name for them. There's a lot of self-talk of, oh, should I, well, they might kill me tomorrow, but at least I'll be like, like she's sort of letting herself do stuff or carry on the way she feels like she wants to, being fully cognizant of the fact that she doesn't know if they're going to kill her. But somehow she's sort of like allowing herself to go, okay, well, let's just be in this moment. And I think some of that is how that sort of behavior of, well, they would like to know this. Okay, well, there's no harm. I'll show them, blah, blah, blah. Or they can watch me, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because she spends a lot of, you're right, and she spends a lot of that time hoping they'll just leave.
Yeah.
So she can go back to doing she spends
a
lot of it just going, maybe they'll go. I'm not going to show that I'm interested, because then they'll just stay.
Because she was quite happy doing what she was doing anyway. She didn't really, she just wanted things to return to the way they were really mostly. So I agree, that's definitely a big part of it. Should we talk drumming?
Yeah, I'm really bummed, Bobby. I'm really bummed you're not here to talk about language, because that would be like the whole bit where what's her name, Belong, was like, oh no, this isn't how it works, or this isn't. I was like going, I bet Bobby's screaming right now at the audiobook. Because I reflected a lot. Kirsten, I don't know if you were reflecting a lot on Project Hail Mary, and I was doing the same thing, because that's one of my favorite books, and the learning of the languages and the exchanges there, and Bobby saying, yes, when you kind of get it and then you get used to hearing things, you can really quickly work out what's happening. It's just exposure and repetition and that type of stuff. So
I think drumming. This one was a bit more realistic in the way that the language was acquired than I think Project Hail Mary made it seem way too easy.
Yeah, look, it's a scientist.
They had computers. Computers made it easy.
And they're not a linguist.
Even with the computers, I think it was a narrative device that they were able to learn each other's language so easily in Project Hail Mary. But I really liked.
Who cares? It was fun.
It was a similar thing in both books, though, which would, I think, is makes sense for two races from different planets, that you don't have the physical ability to create that sound. It's not just ability of being able to, like, you might not even hear the sound correctly because you might not be hearing the same frequencies, but you can't also vocalize that sound. And I think that was an interesting
I think that comes from her background. She's a biologist, a particular type that I can't think of. And I think that's why that was a big part of how she really thought through elements of this.
Elizabeth Moon, the author.
Elizabeth Moon, yes. She's a biologist of some kind. I'm trying to find it really fast.
And you can see that in like the design of the people, like
the design of the people, the design of the what it's like to go live on a foreign world when you can't consume what's native there and things like that.
Like she's talking about the babies with the stripes. I mean, I was just thinking like emu chicks, like
I got big bird vibes, big bird vibes from the people. I know they had lips and everything, but I so that's kind of how I imagined them. And there was some fan art that had them sort of bird-like as well. And then when they talked about the throat sac, I know there are birds that have. So just when you just said she's a biologist, I'm like, oh, she's just pulling it, from all over the place. Love it. So
I was actually curious. That far apart, anyway.
I was actually curious on your audio version. So one of the things that I sort of wish, so I have some complaints about my audio version that I think could have been done better. So I want to talk about those later. But in particular, when she was using the names, so she was saying things like clip, claw, cur. I was like, it would be so much better if she was saying caw, cur sort of thing.
Yes, so mine, I actually wrote down a note. I'm disappointed my narrator didn't try to pronounce the click and the core, because it's obviously like and then here, which is like core, but it's obviously, and then the gurgle cough. That might be a bit.
Well,
much.
see, that's where I got stumbled, because I was thinking it was a great idea until I tried to do the gurgle click cough, and I was like, okay, I cannot do a gurgle on command.
Yeah. But I did think about there's certain peoples in parts of Southern Africa that use click-based languages.
Yes.
So it is totally a thing. And you know,
I
was
knew
like,
how to do it, because I learned how to do it from trying. I used to be a movie that I watched when I was a teen, where they had people from the African. I can't think of the name of the African.
The Gods Must Be Crazy, or
No, it wasn't that.
Oh,
but one of the actors who's in that was in this movie. It's called A Far Off Place. It's like Reese Witherspoon's first movie.
Right.
And it's like a really old Disney movie that you can't even get anymore because like it's not available anywhere.
I thought of The Gods Must Be Crazy too, Lisa, and I can tell you right now, if you've never rewatched it as an adult, don't do it, because it's so bad. It's so like
something tells me it wouldn't hold up,
and really racist, and I never realized that. And when I watched it as a kid, and then I watched it again when I was older, and I was like horrified.
Anyway, the point was
I
used to practice doing the click in like when I was talking and stuff. So when I was doing this, I was like, oh, clicks, I can do clicks. But the gurgle was beyond me. I tried, I couldn't get it to go.
My father could actually speak, and he actually taught me at one point to say Orza, but I still had trouble saying it. Apparently the Orza have actually got 4 clicks. They're 4 different ones.
Oh
wow.
wow.
I believe it.
That I do not have the ear for.
Like your tongue is doing something different for all.
Yeah, because you can click it.
It's in the soft palate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, and Dad could do it, and then I was like, how are you doing that?
Yeah. But the languages were cool, and I love the drumming. We're back to the drumming.
Yes.
The left and the right.
Yes,
and the
what
agreement
it means. Yeah.
And just how music was woven basically into their language. Like it wasn't just this is, you know, and it was just really nice, and I really enjoyed that kind of cultural aspect.
I love the makes sense for a species that could have been related to birds. To have a very musical language.
Does make sense.
Was it Ophelia that remembered the ratites and thinking that they were like the ratites, the flightless birds, the emu, the cassowary,
She did mention that. It was it was mentioned. I didn't know that's what they were, but there was a mention of there being flightless birds, and
cool. But I particularly liked the concept of you drum with your, I think, and I could have this around the wrong way, you drum with the left hand when you're introducing a new idea, and the right hand is when we're in agreement on things and we know this thing to be true. But I could be wrong about which way it was.
It's the other way around, but only because I just finished reading it.
I didn't write it down. That was my mistake. I finished like 2 weeks ago.
I liked there was one point when Ophelia was like, I don't even need to look to know which side you're drumming because I can tell. Like, I thought that was really good.
Yeah. Whether you're agreeing or going, no, that's not right. I'm in dispute with that.
Yeah.
But she I love the fact that she's sort of one of her major connection points at the early stages was music with them, and the way she would the drumming and the dancing and things. I thought that was really lovely.
Yeah, because was there that scene where she'd gone to sleep and they were out in the room drumming it was the evening, and they were trying to be sort of quiet because they seemed to understand that she needed sleep and they shouldn't disturb her, but she came out and crouched down in the hallway or something and was listening.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. And they asked her to come join them, and she played the gourd. And I liked that she gave the flute a go, and she thought, oh no, I can't do it. But then I remember thinking, oh, you probably can, but it takes practice because these are people who've been doing it there, you know. And then they showed off, obviously. And then she gave it a go at another point and got notes out of it, which I thought was awesome. So I liked that kind of growth as well. And she was sort of like, maybe again they were more able to teach her how to get the best notes out. So, you know, I'm making assumptions here, but I just like the idea is like that was the first night she tried, but after that she'd watched it being played, she's absorbing the knowledge, maybe there's a teaching session at some point. I think it was just really cool.
Even just attempting, because she does speak some of their language, and that's creating mouth movements that maybe she's like the muscles are getting stronger. Yeah.
But like even like for humans, like playing a flute or like blowing across the bottle top is not necessarily the easiest at first.
Yeah.
Tell me about
Anyone
it.
tried to play a trumpet or
No,
like
I played flute for 6 months.
It took me forever to get even a sound out of it. Like when I first was learning flute when I was in primary school, my God, I just thought it'd be like the recorder and you just blow it and it works. Nope.
I'd like to
Yeah, blowing in different ways.
but
gives you
I
different
don't know
sounds.
that I could do it, because I think it might be disrespectful, because it's men's business, I think, in most cultures in Australia. But anyway, but yeah, I'd like to give that a go, because of the whole. It's much harder than trumpet. And they do the
breathing
circular
element is really
breathing.
difficult.
Yeah.
The circular breathing would be a killer thing.
Yeah, that's always the impressive thing to me. It's like, is this about that? It's more, the circular breathing. It's like is it, I'm not going to get the right, it's not Tibetan, but the throat singing.
Oh yes.
Oh,
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So amazing. And being
not
able to get the
Tibetan.
different.
Is
Is it Tibetan?
Is it Tibetan?
Nepalese?
Yes.
I'm
remember,
sorry, I
know
don't know
about
where
it, but
the
I do
throat
know what
singing
you
comes
mean.
from, but it's amazing.
Look
And
it up.
the ability to get two different notes out of the throat at the same time, just incredible.
So I've got a question about Ophelia's time by herself.
Which was my favorite bit.
Yeah,
it was like the
best
dream.
bit. Yes, definitely the best bit. You get so attached to her through all of that.
Absolutely.
I was wondering, did she accidentally go vegetarian during that period?
No, she kept talking about the pork that she was defrosting out of the fridge.
Yeah. But when the pork, she was saying how the pork was going to run out soon, and that was fairly.
She made roast lamb for the people, the shuttlecraft people.
So she must have been killing, but they didn't go into detail about it then.
No, she still had stuff in freezers at that point.
Yeah, she was still going through the freezer.
Lamb. And there was also a point when the people showed up, the younger ones, and she didn't get time to organize. Oh, it was when the big storm came, and she was like, "Oh well, I haven't been eating all of the pre-made meals because I like my own cooking better." And she made she had one of the pre-made meals, so there was still lots of stuff in the freezer even at that point.
She'd been there, like they used the phrase a few times in those years. So she'd been alone for years before the young as I understand it.
They don't really explicitly say how long, but you do get the impression after a while, you're like, I think it's been like 6 years or more.
Yeah. Something I wanted to ask is like, how long do you think that from the time that they left to the time that she passed away? Because I think it could be like 40 years or so, that period of her.
Who left? The time from when who left?
From when they when Sims Corporal effed off and she hid to the time that she passed away. Because I think it could be 40 years or so.
I don't think so, because towards the very ending, one of her last bits is about wondering whether they're in a cryogenic sleep for 30 years or something. So wondering whether when they wake up, they're going to remember.
So it could be longer.
She died in cryo, and they're still.
No, she was going to be dead before they arrived. So.
Yeah.
Oh, I understood that they still had another 30 years to go. That was what I understood. There was still another 30 years of cryo to go. So, but yeah, okay,
I don't know. I know that she was 70 when the crew showed up. So I'm thinking maybe she only had another 10 or 15 years, judging by average kind of human lifespan, although she's pretty healthy. So maybe she might have hit 100, because really healthy humans do.
Yeah, because I was
trying
trying
she
to
was
work
pulling
out.
off was pretty impressive for a 70-year-old.
Yes.
I was
body being sore. I'm like,
I was trying to work out how old she was when they left, because
she was 70 when they left. They were really explicit.
Right, she was 70 when she left, because I didn't know if she was because I didn't know if she was maybe a bit younger, because obviously she'd been having children a lot younger, and then I wasn't sure, like, because she said she was a young one. So I was like, how did that all kind of come into play?
So she was 30. She was 30 when they came to the planet originally,
right? And she already had 3
kids there for 40 years, and she already had some kids when they got there. Humberto.
The husband, or no, the
No, Barto.
Barto.
Sorry, it's because Barto's got two names in the written version, and in the I don't remember the other name being used in the audio, but whatever. Barto was the youngest, I believe, and so he was probably born on the planet, so he was probably less than 40.
Right. Yeah.
And
cool.
he had lived long enough to have a second wife as well. So
Yeah.
And
Because
also
that's what I was
one
trying
of
to figure out where everybody was in the
one of the-
timelines.
Yeah, that's right. Because one of the women that she had raised with one of her daughters, that she still thought of as a young woman, she actually at one point describes that she's actually a grandmother herself.
Yeah.
So,
I remember that.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I'm assuming
So
everyone there is having children a little younger, perhaps, than modern Australian women. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, I was trying to work out. Yeah. So in my head, she passed away when she was like 90 odd, but I had her there longer. But it sounds like I'm about on track.
They sort of imply that it's not too long after everything sort of properly gets established that she sort of is taking on a very light role as the Click Hawker at that stage. She's definitely the one who's the head, but they're mostly just letting her sleep a lot and things are being taken care of by Kira and stuff. So I was guessing that maybe she from when she hid and stayed by herself, because I keep saying they left her. They didn't leave her. She stayed. From when she chose to stay, I was guessing maybe about 20 years or so.
Oh yeah.
Because I was guessing I was being very generous on the time before the scientists came, because it was very ambiguous as to how much time had passed. But you definitely got a sense of a good number of years. And I was like, okay, well, I'm thinking here somewhere along the lines of 6 to 10. Being generous on the other end, I'm going to add another 10. So
I love, did we want to talk about the time she was alone? Because it was pretty cool.
I loved her ornament stuff and all of her stuff that she made for herself.
Yeah, she was really living the dream. So when they kept asking her, weren't you lonely? Why would you want to stay? I'm like, oh my God, really? Like, have you not been around other humans? That
was me.
divine.
I'm like, God, it sounds like paradise.
Awesome.
A mother, a grandmother,
and it's just food in the freezers, and you can just garden and craft.
The food.
Showers in all of the homes. You just go from room.
I loved that she's like, I'm going to go and have a shower in somebody else's house. And I'm going to sleep in somebody else's bed just for the hell of it. Like,
I love
just try them all out.
When she first walks down the street naked.
Yes. Oh, that moment is so good.
Yeah. No, it was my favorite part.
Also, I see that our book club is making a genre of grandmas with their tomato plants. Because we had Jackalope Wives with a grandma with a tomato plant. So here we go.
On our bingo card for next year. A grandmother with a tomato plant.
Yeah, is it a grandma with a tomato plant? Yep.
Oh, it's fabulous.
Funny.
That was funny to me too, that when the the scientists came with the shuttlecraft, that she's like giving them tomatoes and they're like, oh yum, and then you don't disinfect the stuff, and it's like, and then they wouldn't eat them anymore, and it was like, oh my God.
Not understanding like the basics of you've got to actually put like.
Well, I was like, how can you disinfect the soil
bacteria alive?
Yeah, the whole thing about
manure
disinfect the soil. Like, why wouldn't you sterilize the soil? And we're like, because then it's not useful. What is wrong with you? Is nobody here a botanist? Where's Mark?
That's right. Where is Mark?
That was one of the things that was frustrating about Kira, because that really was kind of her field, was that like the exobiology.
How do you not know that? Mind you, I do love her scene when she first meets, I've forgotten what she calls this, the garden one.
The gardener.
The gardener who wants the slime rod.
Yes.
and they're carnivores. I assume they're carnivores. They seem to be carnivores. And of course, this is like some little tasty sweet treat to it. And she's like trying to gag.
Yeah. Whereas I was thinking,
so good.
Brilliant. Give this one that job, because that sounds like a shit job, picking all the slime. Just get this guy to come and just do it for you, and then you won't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
But she
Yeah.
seems to
Win-win.
enjoy her garden so much, so
Yeah.
she didn't want to give up
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah. So I very much enjoyed it, to the point that I was a bit sad when the aliens came. I'm like, oh. And then they just and they were just there all the time. I'm like, yeah, I'm annoyed with you too. Like,
leave me alone. I just want to work on my beads.
just let me work on my beads.
But there's something too about it. I don't know if this was for everybody, but there was something about her grumpiness that was just so freaking adorable.
Mhm.
And every time she would be like, such children, I'd be just like, I just want to give you hugs so much.
It just rang
Except for
true.
you wouldn't
Yeah.
take it because I'm a child, clearly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the scene
Yeah.
where they like, oh, sorry, were you saying something, Sarah?
No, go.
The scene where she's like trying to explain to them why it's dangerous, with the zzz, and then
Mhm.
she demonstrates it, and three of them like basically poo on the floor.
Yes.
I'm not cleaning that up.
That's my
fan of the
moment.
I like to go on.
Oh, so
Oh.
freaking good.
It was very funny. Yeah. There was one thing Elizabeth did an ebook, and it sounds like Lisa did partial ebook. So I didn't know until she was talking to Belong that Sarah was an honorific. Was
Oh,
that
yes.
obvious in the? Because I thought she just used the middle name. I just thought it was a middle name.
I could hear the difference because there was the one, I forget who it was, that said it as Sarah, and one that said it as Sarah. And I could hear the difference, like when I could hear the difference between, I forget everybody's name, but there was one character who seemed to be from the same culture as her and like knew what that honorific, like was being more
No, he
It
wasn't.
was awesome.
It was Orson, and that's because he's an anthropologist, and so he understands how cultures work.
Yeah.
Right. So he
yeah.
was using the term, like using the title correctly. And I think the narrator did a really good job because I could actually hear the difference in the way that he was saying it to the way that
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Context
I think it was
made it
just like
clear.
the beginning though, where she was talking to the other people in the community center, and they're like, Sarah Ophelia.
I missed that. I missed it.
I
Yeah,
just thought
I think that
it
went
was
over my
like,
head at that point.
yeah,
So
I
I
just
think
thought
I
it
have
was
a
the
theory
full
as to
name.
why it was hard to pick it up in that early stage. Later on it was different,
Yeah.
but at that early stage I have a theory. It's because of
Yeah.
Rosara. You've got Sarah Ophelia, but then you're constantly referring to Rosara. And I couldn't understand what the hell was going on with this Sarah bit, like where it was going and everything. And it wasn't until I saw the spelling, because I got the ebook early on when I was listening to it the second time, and I looked at the spelling, I was like, well, hang on. That's Rosara, A-R-A, not Sarah, S-E-R-A.
Oh, that's interesting. So your audio, because it was Rosario in my audiobook. That's interesting. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
no, it's Rosara in the book as well.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting because you're also one of the differences.
Maybe that was why, because it was too confusing. But then it still didn't pick it up. So there you go.
I actually didn't pick it up until she actually addressed someone as Sir.
Yeah. So.
And then,
and then after that, I started noticing.
Oh, it's an honorific.
It's an honorific because then at first I thought, oh, it's an honorific for Mrs. And then I realized when she referred to Orson as also Sarah, I was like, oh, it's a general honorific it's a title of respect. You don't.
Oh, then what was Sir then? Because there's also the SER at some point.
Maybe. Oh, so interesting because I couldn't hear the difference. My audiobook, it sounds like the same thing. Yeah. But it's spelled differently, is it? Was there a male and female honorific?
Yeah. I don't know about I could hear it though.
Yeah, I couldn't hear it. It sounded the same. Because I guess it's just just running it together. Yeah. Anyway, that was one of my questions because and also I didn't realize because I didn't read the title. I didn't know it was Ophelia with an F, which I also was really cool because I just
was like, I didn't know either.
Phones and I was
I found that out today when I bought the last rush.
I found out right now because
So, Elizabeth, because you read the book all the way through, so Bartow's full name is Bartholomew, which was not mentioned in my audiobook version at all. It was only when I got the physical book and I was looking for spellings of names, I came across Bartholomew. I was like, who the hell's Bartholomew? Was it mentioned more than once or twice that his full name was that?
No, it was only once or twice.
Right.
She mostly refers to him as Barto.
Okay, yeah. So I can see why they probably made that change in my version, because and just went with Barto the whole way, because it was without seeing Bartholomew next to Barto, I wouldn't have made the connection between the two of them.
Right. Yeah. I
You're
thought
not a Simpsons fan?
Sorry?
I said you must be a Simpsons fan.
But yeah, Bartholomew
yeah,
Simpson.
I'm just not. I would have just thought that they were talking about someone else, unless it was really explicit. I would have just thought that there was another person being referred to, I think.
I thought he had been named after his father. I didn't know it was Bartholomew. I thought he was Humberto Jr. and then known as Berto to be different from his father, Humberto.
That's what I thought it was until I looked it up, which is why when I came across Bartholomew, I was very, very confused as to who this person was.
It's so interesting. Yeah. Sorry.
I'd literally gone well past that point, but I was just getting it from my notes, like all of the names down. And so I thought, I'll just buy the ebook. I'm quite happy to. And yeah, I was going through it and came across Bartholomew first. And I was like,
so interesting. Yeah.
I would like to talk. Oh, unless someone else was.
Can I finish on the audio book before we move on?
Go on. Yeah.
I had a question about when we first get the people's perspective in the audiobook in your version. In my version, you have no idea what the fuck's going on.
I had no idea.
There's no real change or transition. There's no pause. There was nothing.
I found the same thing. I was like, what the hell? What's going on? It took me a second to work out, this is...
I rewound.
Yeah.
I rewound. I went, hang on. I think we just changed points of view. Rewind. Oh, yeah, we have. Okay. Yeah, it felt like it was mid-chapter. It
really just felt like from paragraph to paragraph. That's all it was.
Yeah.
It didn't, and it happened again later, I think, with Kira as well. And I was like, what's going on here? So I was just curious as to whether or not they found a way to differentiate that better.
I would have liked Tinkerbell's.
Yeah.
You know, like
I think a long pause would have made
just
it.
a longer pause. Longer pause. That would have been fine.
Because it just flowed on so immediately that it was just no indication that, like, if you were reading a normal book, there would have been like a bigger white gap than there would have normally been.
Either with a nice little motif or 3 dots, and you would have gone, oh, okay.
It was just a bigger white gap section break.
Yeah, which is not an uncommon way.
Do you think it was a narrative device to encourage the reader to not get caught up in their aliens, but seeing them as people? Like, do you think that's what it was?
I don't think it served any purpose.
It was confusing because it did immediately start referring to them as the people were talking or something, and I'm like, wait,
it went straight into a drumming scene, and I don't think that actually helped in any way to help you think of them as people, because it was so very different. You're confused because it was very different almost immediately, and you weren't understanding what was going on, and there was no sort of any indicator of it coming. And so you had to go exactly that. I had to rewind and go, what the hell just happened there?
Yeah, I didn't know if we had I was like, is this a flashback? Is this a flash forward? Is this I honestly thought it was a flashback or a memory. I couldn't quite work it out. It wasn't until I was like, oh, okay, right. This is what
I was very naughtily looking at my phone trying to figure out if there was something going on with the chapters. I was on country road. There was nothing around me.
All good. I had to rewind because I clearly remember where it happened. I was in the kitchen, unloading the dishwasher, and I went, hang on, what the hell? What?
What's this left-hand drumming thing? What right-hand drumming? What?
I was like, come out of the dishwasher. I'm holding plates. What the hell? Where are we? There's talking.
Didn't help that they didn't explain any of the drumming element at that stage too. It's much later on that they go in and sort of help you to understand what's going on between the two different drummings. And I'm like,
but I didn't mind that.
No. It was fine. It was the lack of gap. I wanted a gap.
I agree. And I also thought, because we had the same thing with Kira, like we had the shuttle. There was a shuttle communication, I think. Communicate.
It was, and these things that they're technically happening, like you sort of do jump back in time a little bit, and then bring you back up to the point where you had stopped and they changed
Yeah.
perspectives.
Basically, it's a bad
in the
time,
audio
go away, or that
Sorry?
bit. She walks up to the
No.
shop and says it's a bad time, go away, and then it jumps back in time to
and-
her.
Oh no, there wasn't the bit. There was a bit where they had a communicate. So I think it was beginning of a chapter where it was a communicate of like a report, and we were being read a report.
Yes.
And that was also like, okay, so we're going to report now. And then I think we got Kira. And then, and then you said like we went back in time and got it from Ophelia's perspective, which I actually was kind of like, I'm not sure this is like it's good to get her perspective, but you could have had that in retrospect if she did something else. I thought it was kind of like,
well, I mean, but they did this
like I'm not sure it added anything to the scene. And then there was one other thing that the only thing I was really happy about was there was a mutiny on board that frickin' colony ship. I was so happy about that because that whole situation was just asshole Sims Corp crap, whoever it was. And when I found out there was a mutiny afterwards because they refused to help and just basically the captain was like, oh well, you're all expendable. I was like, good. I'm pleased to hear it.
Because it's one thing to go, there is nothing I can do to help you, and like if I try to help you, more people will die. And it's another thing to go, I really don't care. I'm about to clock off anyway. So
it was just looking. They were expendable resources as opposed to people, and that seemed to be the attitude a lot of the companies. And we got. But it was also setting us up for the attitude that we would get from the scientists, which was, this is the way things are. Yeah.
I think that was pretty clear right from the beginning too, with when they were first leaving, and they're like, well, you have to pay to take her because she's useless. And it was like, she fucking went here from the beginning and set up the whole fucking colony, and now it's like, oh, now because she's old, you have to pay for her to leave because she's useless. So it was obviously very clear from straight away that company was very like, it's all about the dollars, which,
Well, and you got penalized if you chose not to have more children. Like, if you were deemed able to have more children and you chose and you refused to have more children, then you were also penalized. Because I think that was part of it too. It was she had refused to have an additional child when something else happened. So they warned her that by doing so they were going to remove something or other about her, like basically part of her pension package.
I think it was not get married again, wasn't it?
Yeah, not get married and have more children.
Yeah.
It was the whole. It was the whole. If you're not going to continue to help repopulate, we're going to remove some of your benefits, like your pension benefits. And she assumed it wasn't going to be a problem because she was happy to garden and just to kind of like be a homebody. By that point, she was over it all. And honestly, if everyone else in the colony treated her the way that her son was treating her, I could understand why, she'd only want to have to take it from one person, not however many people were living in that village. So
I got the impression that her, like, the husband was an asshole as well, like the second husband. Was she married to the first guy that she was actually in love with, or were they just
No, she wanted to marry him, and her father refused. So she went off and slept with him anyway because that's who she wanted to be with.
Right.
And then married Humberto.
Yeah.
So interesting information about Elizabeth Moon. She lives in a small town in Texas.
She's also multiracial, I believe, from what I read of her bio, which
doesn't say anything here, but she certainly looks it in her picture.
I think the clue I got was her maiden name. I think was part of, because her maiden name I think was Spanish or Portuguese.
Yeah, it's not here, so I don't know for sure. But yes, I would say that she's definitely got something. So there's definite influences coming from there.
Yeah.
I'm assuming nobody else has read any other Elizabeth
I was just about to ask. Yeah, I haven't. I want to now. I'm curious.
I want to. I've struggled ever since I read this one the first time. I've been wanting to, but I've struggled to pick something from everything I've been seeing to sort of know this is where the direction I should go if this is the elements of this book that I liked.
Yeah.
And that's what's been holding me up. I haven't figured that out, which is why I'm like, did anybody else read Elizabeth Moon other than this one?
No, I haven't.
As a-
Although she did have like I think it was like I can't remember whether it's a fantasy, alternate history, or steampunk, or could have been anyway, something in that area. She wrote a series, I think, of that has been on my radar. I'm meaning to pick up for a little while. I think it was called Blood and Iron series or something.
Okay.
She's also she did something with Anne McCaffrey. It was called Sassenach, which I was like, I kind of want to try that. Just I'm curious if they were riffing a little bit
That's
on
where
the
I
whole
know her name
Outlander thing,
from.
and then wanted. But this is obviously like a sci-fi thing, and it's meant to be in the same universe as the Dragon Riders of Pern. It's just it's a different area of the universe, but it's if I remember, if I'm not confusing my books, but definitely Sassenach is the one she wrote with Anne McCaffrey.
I think Sassenach might have been a space-based one, but I could be wrong. I don't think it was Pern.
The third one as well.
It is space-based.
Yeah, it's definitely space-based.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I was
It's
thinking
not
on
in the
Pern the World, but if you're talking about space-based but not on Pern the World, then that's different. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry, yeah. Because I first said world and then I was like, no, I mean universe. So it's the same.
Yeah, that makes more sense. Yes.
The world. Yeah,
there's one that I've got my eye on. I'm not sure, but it's a women. She won a Nebula Award for it, called Speed of Dark.
Okay. Yeah, she's got a few awards. I did notice that it said she had at least one Nebula, maybe two.
But yeah, Sassenach is where I know her name from. I was like, I know her name before this one. I just don't know where from. But I never read those ones. So
I think go ahead.
I was just going to say, side note, I keep referring to this book as Remnant Moon because on the cover, her surname is really prominent. And it just got stuck in my head that way.
I was actually wondering also because that sounds a lot like Relentless Moon, which was the Mary Robinette Kowal book.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Remnant Moon is a really good name for a sci-fi book, though, just to be clear.
Yeah.
It's a good name.
For a post progressive metal band as well.
Always.
I wanted to say one more thing about the drumming, but I also, now that Bobby's back, Bobby, you don't know that Sarah literally looked at the camera and said, I'm so sorry that you're not here right now, Bobby, because I want to talk about language.
All right.
But I did want to ask one thing about the drumming sequence that involved the young ones as they were trying to decide. They had this conversation that was like, she's alone. She's still a monster. Well, she's not them. Well, we don't know that they killed the baby. There's this conversation happening, and then there's was that the sequence where they nutted out that she might be old, and that those young ones first thought, I wonder if she's a nest guardian. That's why she's here alone.
Yeah, that's what I remember, is that scene where they're talking about, they're kind of reflecting on what's happened, and they're trying to decide if she's a threat and why is she there, because all the other humans they'd seen were in groups. Yeah, and they did mention that she had this white chunk of hair, and they were wondering if that meant that she was old or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although I don't think they recognized hair because they didn't have any themselves.
No,
they just said
they
she was white on top.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I thought was a great
We know that they were referencing the hair, but they did not use the word hair, no.
All right, cool. I just wanted to clarify that. But yeah, Sarah, did you want to prelude it? Because you were the one who very much looked at the camera and went, Bobby, I wish you were here.
No, because I just presume she's going to watch it back. That was my thing of then she'll put a comment on the YouTube video. I think we were just commenting. It was just a reference to Project Hail Mary, and I always remember you made a really good point about learning learning a language, and that when it's through exposure and repetitive action, that yes, you can learn quite quickly, and we all accepted that there are narrative devices in that world, but it was also, we liked that I remember the particular comment I made, which was when Belong is telling Ophelia, no, this is how language works. I had imagined you sitting there screaming at the audiobook. Yep,
Oh,
I
was. Yep. I actually, so I was, the whole time I was up to the last 2 hours ish, I was listening to this when I was making dinner at night. So like while I was doing the chopping up and the cooking and things. So it was a good like hour and a half or whatever of listening time. And I had to stop. And I had to sit somewhere to listen to it because I was like, I'm gonna lose a finger because I am so angry at this. I'm like, that's not how language acquisition works. Yeah,
it was good. It's good that our friends know you and know and have listened and been taught by you enough to know that was wrong.
If it had been a book, I probably would have thrown it across the room a few times. It was very frustrating. I did not like Belong. I was kind of ambivalent to her until that discussion, and as that was happening, I was like, oh, you.
No, and it's not even just that she was ignorant to how much Ophelia really knew. It was the condescension that which she talked to her with, like, oh, but you don't really understand. And it's like,
and she was
talking to
and how many alien languages have you been exposed to and gotten the opportunity to learn?
Like she was conflating language with communication, and she was completely missing the point. Because she was going from the point, she was looking for a way to justify in her head how she could completely ignore and cast Ophelia aside and not have to consider her experience or her exposure or anything. But she wasn't actively doing that. Her brain was just looking for ways to do that. So she was taking the stance of, well, you don't have an internal understanding, and they don't have an internal understanding because they're not the same as us, and so therefore nobody understands anybody because you just can't. You're not built to do so. Computers are the only things that have been able to do this so far.
So can you clarify for us a little bit about that? What she was not understanding about the difference between language and communication, because I'd like to hear your perspective on it.
So she did not use those words specifically. So the argument she was making was she was telling Ophelia, oh, but you're not speaking to them, because Ophelia at that point was starting to mimic and try and use, well, not mimic, she was using, and she had picked up some certain sound sequences, but mostly proper nouns and names and stuff, but she was using them like click clock here and whatever, and she knew she couldn't say it the same, but it was good enough, and the understanding between the people who like her and the people was enough that they were communicating, even if she couldn't say it exactly as they did. It's like someone who speaks an English in an accent, even if it's really thick, right? It takes a moment, but after after a couple of iterations, you pick up on what it is, and you can get your point across, and the points and grunts. So Belong was taking it from the point of view of, oh, well, you can't say it exactly, so therefore you're not using language. And the thing is, all language does is it is a structured means in which we efficiently communicate. But you can efficiently communicate with sign language very well, and you use no linguistic anything whatsoever. And
and she even says that I mean, it goes the other way too, because they were they couldn't make the human language sounds either, and they're when she's showing them the fridge and saying cold, and they're going cut, and she's like, oh, they mean cold. They obviously can't make the sound for cold, but you can tell they know what it means. Well, that's what they're doing with her, and she's like, oh, it was the click cork here. She's like, can't you hear that you're saying like this, and then they're saying it like this, and and I feel like sounds the same to me. But the people knew what she was trying to say in the same way she knew what they were trying to say when they couldn't make the exact English sound or whatever language. They're probably not necessarily speaking English with, but you know what I mean?
And that's where you get,
they can figure it out.
That's where you get communication. You make an effort to use the sounds or the structure that someone else is using, and when that doesn't work, you add in additional cues to communicate. And that's actually, so she had just studied linguistical structures, and that's all she probably cared about. So she had lost sight of the point of language, which is to communicate and to get things done in some form or fashion.
Yeah. And it's funny because when your example about accent, which is exactly what I screamed out loud at that point, I'm going, ever heard of accents, lady? You know,
Yeah.
and you know, it's like, and even in this book, interestingly, while you weren't here, we discovered that Mel's audio version with the narrator pronounced Rosario completely different to our person, and it was actually
wasn't pronounced different. It was a totally different name.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's Rosera in the book, in the physical book,
and
on my audio.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry, I thought it was just pronounced. Okay. So yeah, right. Right. Anyway, I was just sort of commenting on that when I heard that. I was like, yes, Bobby's going to be very angry and annoyed about that.
Yeah, it is. And she was placing a higher importance on verbal, like oral, sorry, not verbal, oral language than she was on anything else. Like, it was so obvious in how she was talking to Ophelia that she saw points and grunts as the equivalent of like baby unsophisticated early stage language development, and oral language development was like, that's what we care about, that's the only thing worth considering. And because Ophelia was like, but I knew babies that were obviously very smart and could not speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and obviously these people who live on this planet, they can make certain sounds, but they can't others. Probably because from a biological perspective, I suspect that from a biological point, they don't have because the sounds they were struggling with are ones that require lips.
Yes, I thought she'd done that deliberately.
Yeah.
They had lips, but not the same necessarily. I do remember Ophelia talking about it, but I imagine more of a beak.
Yeah, she said they weren't quite fleshy like ours.
Yeah, that was it. I do remember maybe a bit more like so I do remember it not being, but yes, I remember that. And the tongue, of course, is so mobile in different ways. But the one thing I did want to ask you about while I've got you here is there was a bit towards the end where Blue Cloak is doing mimicry, and I didn't know. I wondered if someone could expand on that. Was Blue Cloak like a bird that can do mimicry, like some of the parrots out there and stuff? Was it a case of, because this Blue Cloak said, but when I want to speak, I'm using a different, like, I was trying to sort of understand what Blue Cloak, because I kind of got it. I think Blue Cloak was saying, this is me as a record player. There's a part of my mind that operates as a recording device, and I'm just like, I've done that and now I'm spitting it forth, but for me to use that, it's different. Like, that's how I sort of took it. But I wondered if anyone else can explain, like, maybe that's not what it was. I wondered if anyone else could explain how it worked with the mimicry.
I actually somehow, my brain at that point could understand what he was saying enough that I sort of translated what he said. Just trying to page now, but I kind of want to do it. Someone else say something while I find the page. But if you don't mind. I think it's in chapter 18.
It's something along the lines of like, when it's my own words, I can't, and when it's like when I'm copying someone else, like, it wasn't in those
when he thinks it. The issue was, if it was something that he's thought of himself, he can only
he's mimicking the sound, he's not mimicking the words, if that makes sense.
Yes, that does make sense, actually.
He did clarify that he still understands. Like, if he hears someone say something, he fully understands what they're saying.
But I mean, even from a language perspective, that makes sense, because listening and processing what you hear, that's your auditory processing, is different. It's a different part of your brain than your oral. Like, your oral and your oral are different. So
and actually, I think about, if you can think about people who can mimic an actor saying something, they can take something and say it, like learn it and say it, but then to take the same things you've learnt from like a southern accent and then apply it to new words or similar words but in different sentence structure, is
very hard.
is very difficult.
Yeah,
It's a
so
different
it
skill
requires a
altogether.
lot
That
of
actually
prep.
makes complete sense. It's like I can say, eat my shorts, but to say other sentences using Nancy Cartwright, no, Yerdling Smith's accented voice as Bart Simpson doesn't have that ability. It's only So okay, cool. Thank you. That was what I was wondering, and actually it was as illuminated things for me.
All right, guys, do you think we're ready to wrap up?
Liv's gonna have a field day with everything.
This video's so long. Do I have to watch it? All right. Thank you for watching, Liv, and anybody else who managed to get through this far as well.
Bobby
Next,
again, if you
maybe again if she gets back. Next month we are reading Belladonna by Adeline Grace. So looking forward to seeing everybody then.